to Mike Drops the Mic. I'm Mike Lineman. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined with Levon Kirkland. Levon was a Steeler. He was drafted in 1992. He played in the NFL for 11 years. He was an All-American at Clemson. He was a two-time All-Pro, two-time Pro Bowler. He was part of the 1990s All-Decade team, and he's one of the most well-known linebackers in Steelers history. Levon, it's a privilege to be with you. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh, it's my honor. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about coming from Clemson and being drafted to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this was in 1992. You were a
hmm
second round pick. You were pick number 38 overall in the draft. What was your draft day experience like?
it was very interesting. It was wonderful. But I was at my sister's home, and I remember the Steelers calling me. But before that, I went to the bathroom because I was so nervous and I wanted them to pick me. So I went to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror, and I was like, "They're gonna pick me. They're gonna pick me. They're gonna pick me." So I did it 3 times. I went to the kitchen table, I sat down, and the phone rang. And Tom Donahoe was a GM at the time. He said, "Hey, Levon, this is Tom Donahoe from the Pittsburgh Steelers. How you doing?" I'm like, "I'm great." He's like, "We're considering picking you for this next pick." I was like, "Ooh, considering." And then a guy named Charles Bailey came on the phone and he was like, "Hey, do y'all have cable TV in Lamar, South Carolina?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Do y'all have ESPN?" And at this time, I was getting a little impatient. I'm like, "Come on, man, don't be playing with me." And then he said, "Hey, man, welcome to the black and gold.
Wow.
You're gonna see your name flash on a ticker." I saw that, and I was overjoyed. I wanted to play for the Steelers because I met Bill Cowher during the whole training process before the pre-draft, and he was the guy I wanted to play for. So I got fortunate and went to the Steelers.
And so you went in the bathroom, you said, please, let it be the Steelers, let it be the Steelers. And you were,
No, no, no. I told the mirror, I was like, "They're gonna pick me."
yeah.
I was demanding. I was like, "They're gonna pick me.
But
They're gonna pick me." I did not back off at all.
beyond that, were there any other teams that you thought might be considering you at that point? Or was it 100% you were sold that this was going to be the Steelers picking you right?
No, well, I really did not know, to be honest with you. But there were some teams that showed some interest, like the Dallas Cowboys, the San Diego Chargers, Cincinnati Bengals. So there were teams that showed interest, but I really wanted to play for Pittsburgh Steelers.
And you had such a physical way of playing, and that's been known that the Steelers defense has been a legendary defense ever since the 70s and in the 90s, and we had a couple Super Bowls in the 2000s, and the defense is known for being physical, which is perfect for the way that you played football. When you transitioned from being an All-American at Clemson to the NFL, was it a difficult transition for you, or did you feel like it was kind of a little bit of a smooth transition when you initially came into training camp?
Oh, it was kind of a transition, only because I played a different position. At Clemson, I played more of a outside linebacker, and then on third down, I was a defensive end. And when I got to Pittsburgh, they saw me more as an inside linebacker. I never played inside linebacker really ever in my life. So even in high school, I played outside. College, I played outside. But the inside position was brand new to me. And it was something that I had to really get used to. So fortunate for me, I was able to, kind of play more special teams, play behind David Little, and that following off season really got used to the position, felt confident that I was going to win the job, and that's what I did. I went out there and really got used to the position, and It was it was a cool transition in that way, but it took me maybe a year to really learn the position. But once I got it, and also we had some trials and errors, we I really thought that that first year that I played well.
Yes, and you're talking one thing that says about the type of phenomenal athlete that you are and football player, making the adjustment from outside linebacker to inside linebacker. One thing is it's requested that you cover the pass a little bit more and you worked on pass
Yes.
coverages. And that's something you
Hmm.
did very well for an inside linebacker. You had 11 interceptions in your career, and I believe you had 4 in that first season when you switched to inside linebacker. Um, so Coach Cowher, did he work with you a lot on playing the pass? Did you feel like that became one of your strengths, or did you feel like more like a run stopping kind of middle linebacker?
Well, I love playing against the pass, to be honest with you, more so than the run. And it was just a knack that I had. I didn't really. I worked on like making interceptions, but I was really a good technician as far as how to cover guys, understanding the angles of the game. And I think as the years went on, and I started playing a little bit more third down, that's when you kind of saw it. And I had some interceptions in the playoffs as well. So really, I had about maybe all total together, maybe like 15 interceptions. So yeah, I love I love that part of the game. I love getting interceptions more than anything. So it was something that I loved. So I kind of worked at it pretty hard, and I was fortunate enough that I got some.
When you were playing against some of the quarterbacks, playing against the Cowboys, like against Troy Aikman or other legendary quarterbacks in that time, were there certain games that you were most pumped up for or most excited to play against certain quarterbacks?
Ooh, I wouldn't say it was the quarterback. I would say it was like, Monday Night Football was always big for the Pittsburgh Steelers back then. We normally play very well on Monday nights, so that was a big deal. And then, like playoff games, divisional games against the Cleveland Browns. So really it wasn't, I mean, certain players got you like pumped up. But for me, I just remember playing in certain atmospheres. You know, Monday night, only game in town at that time. It was exciting. You know, it was you're in front of the big lights. When you're playing against a rival like Cleveland, that was huge. Or the big stage and playing in the playoffs. I still the playoffs are still my favorite time of the year. That's when I really miss football and being a player because you either win or you go home, and I like that situation.
Yeah, it really shows the type of player you are, making it to the playoffs that many times and being on such a good team. You know, the Steelers in the 90s were great. They made it to the Super Bowl 30 against the Cowboys. Even though Steelers lost that game, it was still one of the best defenses in the NFL that season. You have phenomenal game that game, 10 tackles and a sack against Troy Aikman. What were some of your favorite memories leading up to the Super Bowl and from that Super Bowl game itself?
Wow, I think the Super Bowl was my aha moment. And I can tell you before we even went out to the game, before we went out and got introduced, one of the our defensive backs, Alvoy Mays, came up to me and he asked me did I know who Matt Millen was. I was like, of course, Matt Millen won all those Super Bowls, was a commentary, was a play by play, or at that time, I think he was just a reporter, and he wanted to get a message to me. And he basically told me that he thought I was the dark horse of the team, as they say. And he was the one that said, hey, you're seeing the right things. You just need to trust your eyes. When he said that, it really clicked for me. And I guess when people are telling you to trust your eyes, he's basically saying, be confident in what you're seeing. You're seeing the right things. Don't be aggressive and make plays. He told me that, and I just really started trusting myself. And I think that's the reason why I had such a big game, because I really trust what I saw and I went after it. I'm already a pretty aggressive player, so it just really worked for me. So I think that really turned my game around. And that's when, besides that Super Bowl game, the next 2 years were probably my best years.
Yeah, and that would be in '96 and '97. One
Right.
thing also about that Super Bowl game with the phenomenal defense, Emmitt Smith, legendary running back for the Cowboys, I think he was held to 54 yards, something like that,
Yeah.
which
Yeah. We we play. I mean,
incredible.
we played them well. We really did. I think he got maybe 20 on one play, and that's maybe the first running play. And I actually went the wrong way, so you can blame me on that one. But after that, we kind of settled down, and once we get that first tackle, it becomes a regular game. Although it's the biggest game in football, you kind of settle down and you just like, okay, let's play football. Let's get ready to work. And man, I really enjoyed the Super Bowl. I mean, unfortunately, we lost, but I think for me, it was a chance for me to show everybody how I could really play.
One thing I wanted to ask you about was Chuck Noll in 1991. That was his last season as the head coach for the Steelers, and that's when Bill Cowher came in. So he was really new to the NFL in terms of coaching for the Steelers when you came in. What do you think was it about Coach Bill Cowher that made him such a legendary coach?
I think his energy, I think it was that although he was a young coach, he coached before, he was a defensive coordinator, and you could tell that he really, really had a special quality of how to relate to the players. And, a lot of times you normally think of a head coach in the NFL back in those days, they were strictly business. It was really, they were tough guys, hard to really, hard to really relate to. And I think because he played in the NFL and he was so young, he was relatable. And the players really started to buy in a little bit on what he could bring to the table. And we were fortunate that we won that first game and the momentum just kept going. And it went on for 6 years. We were playing really well at the time. So I think that he just really knew how to relate to players. He really built relationships. And when you can build relationships and have a great rapport with your players and your players buy into the system, then that's when you're going to see a lot of success.
And that's one of the things I've heard about Coach Mike Tomlin is that he's somebody who really builds relationships with the players on the team and helps create a really nice team atmosphere. In that sense, I mean, Coach Cowher and Coach Tomlin both came into the league when they were younger, and Coach Tomlin's been here for many years. How do you think they're similar in the way that they coached, and how do you think they differ?
Oh wow! I don't know if they really differ that much. I think maybe Coach Tomlin is probably better on the mic than Coach Cowher, and he has some great catchphrases. But I really think they're similar in a lot of ways. I think they're defensive coaches. So when you think of defensive coaches, you're going to have normally you're going to have a really good defense. You're going to be physical. You're going to have great special teams, and you're going to probably run the ball. It's going to be your major. But those guys are, to me, they're similar more so than different.
Yeah,
Matter of fact, I don't really even know that. Like I said, I think that Tomlin does a better job as far as catchphrases and talking to the media. He's a little bit more savvy, but Bill wasn't bad either. So I give him the notch on that. But I think they're pretty similar as far as their coaching style and their philosophy.
You mentioned playoff football is your favorite time to watch football, and it's the time when you do start to miss playing in the NFL. Have you been keeping up with the playoffs this season?
Oh yeah, yeah. I really always watch the playoffs. I think the playoffs are exciting. I think you see the best football. I think you see the emotion of the game. That's the best part of it. I think sometimes the regular season doesn't quite do it unless you have an exciting game. But the playoffs, you see the very best of the NFL.
And this past weekend, the Steelers unfortunately lost in the wild card against the Buffalo Bills, 31-17. That was a tough game because it felt like the Steelers were in that for even though they trailed, I think 21-0 at one point and started making a comeback, they showed signs of life. They got it to within 7 in the fourth quarter, and it looked like there could be a chance. All things considered, I think they played pretty well. George Pickens had that fumble early on in the game. Mason Rudolph threw an interception at the goal line early in the game, but he came back
Yeah.
to 2 touchdowns in the game. Um, Offense didn't look terrible with Mason Rudolph. What did you think about the game?
Oh yeah. When you're playing a team at their place in the playoffs, it's going to be tough. You have to really have a mentality that you're going to take it to them and you're going to be aggressive. And you get behind early, it's doubly tough. But I thought that the Steelers were valued in their effort. I thought they did a good job of coming back. The one run. The disappointing thing was the one run that the quarterback just kind of broke off about 52 yards.
Yeah.
I thought that was tough, you know, and also that's why I hate that kind of sliding rule where he kind of faked like he was going to slide, and then he kind of and I think that's kind of unfair for a defense because we want to be aggressive and we can't go at them aggressive. If we hit them, it's a targeting call. But I tell you what, I'm almost tempted to say like, listen, go after him. No, if he slides, he slides. You know, but that little move that he did, uh, it kind of, I think that one was the killer. Even though I mean the Steelers came back and all that, but I think big play here, big play there. You know, and you can't do that when you're going against a really good team.
Yeah, that Bills offense is a powerhouse. Their quarterback, Josh Allen, on that 52, 54-yard run that you're speaking of, he's a big physical guy. He's
It
big.
really is.
He's built like Big Ben, but I tell you what, he can move a lot better than Big Ben could. And he's down
No
the
question.
field there. And yeah, that's tough because, I mean, in the NFL, when you were playing, you're making big hits as a linebacker, and it seems like now you can't hit them low, you can't hit them high. What are you supposed to do when it looks like the guy's about to slide downfield? You're gonna hit him and give up an extra 15 yards for a penalty, or he does like that stutter step, fake slide look, and he goes in the end zone, gets a touchdown. The thing about
Yeah.
this game is when you go behind 21-0 against an offense like that with the Bills, I thought that if the Steelers were to win this game, they would have to keep it close from the beginning, and we'd have to get Najee Harris to run the ball well. When you get behind so many points, you really have to start relying on the pass, and you can't run the ball. You know,
Right.
Najee had
Hey,
been running the ball so well the last few weeks. I think he averaged 3.1, 3.2 yards per carry against the Bills, which that's not going to get the job done, unfortunately. But
no, it really isn't. And, I thought Mason really played well up to this game. And you're relying on your quarterback who's down 21-0 to try to come back. It's going to be difficult. It's not really his forte. But I think he showed a lot. I really did. The Steelers, with the pedigree and everything, the Steelers are still the Steelers. But you got to have an offense in place. They did, and your best defensive player is out of the game as well. So it just made it a little difficult. They put themselves in a hole. They tried to climb out of it, but it was a little too much.
And we're still, of course, months away from this moment. But now Mason Rudolph with that hot streak at the end of the season, he played well. You have to talk about if he's coming back to Pittsburgh because he's a free agent, he can come back or look elsewhere potentially. Do you think Mason Rudolph could be the quarterback one for the Steelers next year over Kenny Pickett? Or do you have to bring Kenny Pickett back in because he was your starter this year? He doesn't have Matt Canada now as the offensive coordinator. He was your first round pick 2 years ago. How do you see the QB1 position going for the Steelers next season?
Man, I think it's a tough decision. I think you do bring Kenny back because you invest, but I think Mason done enough that they need to compete for the job. I know in the NFL, a lot of times you don't want competition as far as the quarterback is concerned. You want a definite QB1 and then have a solid QB2 that's backing them up. So a lot of times you don't want that competition because that means you really don't know who the quarterback is. And a lot of times that kind of makes head coaches, GMs, owners, offensive coordinators a little nervous about what they can do. But I think Mason deserves a chance to compete for the position. I think you do bring Kenny Pickett back, but I think you have no choice but to let them compete and see who's the best guy.
I think of when you're talking about switching the quarterbacks, and you don't really want to do that because it might rattle their confidence. I think about Zach Wilson for the Jets. It seems like he's been in and out all the times, whether it's due to injury or other quarterbacks for the Jets not playing well. They keep throwing him in. I'd hate to see the Steelers get to a situation where we can't be decisive about who we want at QB1. But I think in this case, I think you're right. I think a competition would be great to see, not only who wants it more, but get the team behind one guy and not have a divided or split locker room this next upcoming
Yeah,
season.
the quarterback position is kind of funny because it's the only position in football that guys are really, they don't want to compete. They want their number one, clear cut number one. And then you kind of put like an entourage. The second string and the third string quarterback are like his buddies. And they're like the ones who kind of, keep him on a pedestal. Everybody else has to compete. But that's just the nature of the game. They just don't quarterbacks are a little bit more fragile. And, those guys don't want to be looking over their shoulders. But it's so funny because it's the only position that gets treated in that fashion.
So, do you think that once the Steelers can decide their quarterback one situation, whether it does end up being after competition, Mason Rudolph or Kenny Pickett, do you think that they have a chance at making another playoff run to the Super Bowl next season under Coach Tomlin? I know a
Yeah,
lot of people kind of, they're not thrilled with Tomlin because he hasn't had that win in the playoffs in a while, won the Super Bowl in 2008. But there's always been some people saying, well, that was the team that Bill Cowher built. Now, I'd like to see Mike Tomlin in there still. But what do you think? Do you think the team under Tomlin could get to the playoffs, make a run, and go toward the Super Bowl in the future? Or do they need to look elsewhere?
no, absolutely. Mike Tomlin can take you to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. Things have to really go. They have to really go on your side. Like you have to really be not only good, but you almost have to be fortunate as well to get to that game. So when you get to the playoffs, it really kind of all depends. Do you play a team that matches up with you well? Hopefully, you play a team that you can beat for the most part. Um, and if you can combine having a really good team, which means your offensive line is solid, your quarterback is not throwing a lot of picks, but throwing touchdowns. Instead, you can run the ball. You have to almost have everything. You got to be able to play defense. You got to be able to put pressure on the quarterback. You got to be able to get interceptions. So when you look at a Super Bowl team, it's normally a complete team. And I just don't think that in the last few years, I would say that the Pittsburgh Steelers had a complete team. It was either the offensive line wasn't that great, the running situation wasn't that great, quarterback situation wasn't that great, or either the defense was had some holes in it. So in order to be a team that gets a chance or go to the Super Bowl, you have to be a pretty complete team and an all-around team that can play comp- complementary football. If you don't have that, most of the time you can have a great offense, but if your defense isn't good, usually that means that you're not going to go all the way to the Super Bowl. And if you do go to the Super Bowl, most likely you're not going to win that thing. So I don't think Coach Tomlin's really had that team that you can say, okay, this team has a really good chance of making a Super Bowl.
And I tell you what, the most important thing is having depth and no injuries and not having TJ Watt, not
Yeah.
having Juan Alexander, Cole Holcomb. Those guys make a difference on that defense. And I mean, TJ Watt, Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And if Tomlin had those guys ready to rock, I think we could have a different story in that Bills game.
I think next year I think really next year is a quarterback because the Steelers are running the ball pretty well the last 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
If they can, if the running game could continue to go on the path it's going, and your quarterback can be a guy who's reliable, who can make plays. Oh yeah, because I think the defense is decent, you know, but I really feel that you talk about making a Super Bowl, you better have a good team. It can't be a glaring weakness on your team, or somebody's going to expose you. So if you can come back and have those deficiencies repaired, I think you got a shot. I think the Steelers got a shot to do it.
Big
But
Ben's.
to
Oh,
say that Coach Tomlin can't do it, I think that's foolish because he's definitely a leader of men. But although you're a leader of men, you got to have the parts there. You got to have you got to have the continuity between the players and the coaches. It's got to be there. You got to have the leadership. It all has to work together. And if it doesn't work, it's evident that it doesn't work.
Big Ben's first year, he took them to the AFC Championship game and they lost to the Patriots. That was a season where Jerome Bettis was coming to the end of his career in Pittsburgh and they wanted to get him a Super Bowl ring. He ends up coming back. They come into the playoffs near the bottom as a seed, come back and beat the Seattle Seahawks in the Super Bowl 21-10. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I watched a press conference of Cam Hayward after this past game. He was battling a groin injury this season. He's getting older in age. He seems like a guy that the Steelers, I'd love to see him get a ring. He's a guy who deserves it, just like Maurkice Pouncey, but Pouncey didn't get his. This seems like a situation to me where Cam Hayward comes back next season and potentially the Steelers go on a run like they did Bettis' final season. I'd like to see Cam Hayward get that Super Bowl ring right off into the sunset and retire. Having a leader like Cam Hayward is so important to the defense. And it feels like he's one of those last guys from that era with, Paul Amalu, James Harrison, Lamar Woodley, like around that hard hitting 2010, 2011 defense. Do you see that as a possibility, them next season being a situation like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it could be a possibility. I don't really exactly know, but he is a good player, and like all good players, you do want to see them ride off to the sunset. It doesn't normally happen that way, but if anybody deserves an opportunity to come back and win a Super Bowl, he definitely does. So I'm rooting for him. I know the odds may be against him, but if this team can play well, man, it's a possibility.
Well, Levon, one of the last things I wanted to ask you about, we talked about the quarterback one situation, making it a competition between Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett. Is there any chance that you think the Steelers should either sign a veteran free agent like a Kirk Cousins Geno Smith, something like that, to also make it a three quarterback competition or draft a guy? Or do you think it should just be between those two? I don't think Mitchell Trubisky's the answer after we saw his play this season. But what do you think needs to be the competition there? Do you consider bringing in another guy?
Wow, I think we bring those guys in. It's a no-brainer that those guys are going to be starter. You can't bring a Kirk Cousins in and say, "Hey, let's compete for the position." Kirk Cousins is a starter. There's no question about that. Now, whether you bring in a veteran guy or not to compete with those two is up to the GM. So I think you got. I think there's something about Mason Rudolph that I like. I think Kenny is just a little bit. I'm not saying mature as a human being, but maybe a little immature as far as how he managed the clock, how he managed the team. So I think the competition keeps you focused. So we'll see. I mean, you never know what moves they're going to make. Maybe maybe they need to make more moves as far as the offensive line is concerned, and say like, hey, let's roll the die and go with one of these two young studs here, and see what happens.
Levon, what are you up to now? What are you up to? What's going on in your life? Where can people follow you and stay up to date to what you're doing?
Wow. Well, I'm at Clemson University now. I am the coordinator of the NIL, name, image, and likeness. And I'm having a ball because I get to interact with the kids and we get to talk about how you see yourself, or how to brand yourself, how to, look out for the pitfalls of the really the NIL and the transfer portal. So it's basically mentoring kids and helping them go in the right direction. And I feel like, man, this is a blessing. This is a God calling purpose that I have, and I'm enjoying it. I'm having a great time with it, and I'm looking forward to the next several years of being here at Clemson. It's my home away from home, so I'm enjoying it. I am. And if people want to catch me, they can get me at Levon underscore Kirkland, and I think I have that for my Instagram and my X profile as well. So if people want to reach out and say hello, they can.
I'll make sure to tag those at the bottom so people can do that and follow everything going on in your life. That storybook, the fact that you're back at Clemson, where you were
Hmm.
American, go there, drafted the Steelers, and now you're back home there. So that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, it is definitely surreal. I did not see this coming at all. That just shows you about having faith in God and doing what you need to do to make things happen. So I'm just really a blessed human being at this time, man, doing what I love to do, still being involved with football. And football is it's like it's like having that great wife and you guys had a good marriage. Things kind of went rocky, but you come back together and now you appreciate it a lot more. You appreciate the opportunities you get to have to mentor guys, to just be around the game. And Clemson University is one of the best football programs in all of college football. So I'm blessed in that way that we're first class all the way. And so yeah, it's been amazing.
Levon, I can tell about the way you're talking about football and the playoffs and your passion with Clemson and the game that you miss it a lot. What do you think are some of the most important things that you miss? Is it being on the field? Is it the locker room with your teammates? What do you miss the most about playing the game of football?
Some people say they don't miss it. I think that I was so in love with football ever since I was a kid. I just loved the game and what it was all about. I know there's politics. I know a lot of it is not always friendly or kind, but I think the great thing about it, it does have a way of developing boys to men.
Mm.
And of course, you get to hang out with some of the best guys. You know, you get to tell funny stories or joke on one another. And the football locker room is probably the fun. I mean, it's the funniest surroundings and environments ever. And you get to do something that's a little bit bigger than yourself. So that's what I really miss about the game. And if I can't play the game, I definitely want to be involved in some kind of way or some kind of capacity. Just gives me an opportunity to be involved. And I'm loving it because you see things in kids that they don't see themselves. And just a little bit of, education, empowering or encouraging is going to help those kids go far.
Well, Levon, it's great to see you inspire young men. It's great to see you give back to the game of football, and it's great to see you. So thank you very much again for chatting with me a little bit. I really appreciate it.
Oh man, thank you. It's my pleasure. Anytime you need me to do this and my schedule permits, man, I'll be more than happy to come back.
Hey, Levon, I appreciate it. I'd love to talk some more ball with you maybe in the off season.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you again.